The email arrived at 7:43 a.m., right between my morning coffee and the weather forecast. Subject line, moving forward. Classic Sienna. Even her breakup messages sounded like corporate buzzwords. Eric, I'm filing for separation. Please respect my privacy during this difficult time. My attorney will be in touch. S. I stared at the screen, steam rising from my mug like some kind of pathetic metaphor. 15 years of marriage, and she gives me the corporate kiss-off. Not even Dear Eric or Love Sienna. Just S. Like I'm some random client she's firing. Privacy, I muttered, taking another sip. Right. My name is Eric Harlan, and I'm what you might call a digital janitor. I clean up other people's messes. Cybersecurity consultant for small businesses in our charming little Maine town of Millbrook. I know exactly how much privacy is worth in the digital age. Absolutely nothing if you know where to look. I forwarded Sienna's email to our joint account, then systematically began the process she'd apparently started without me. Joint credit cards, closed, emergency contact at my office, changed to my buddy Terry, shared streaming accounts, password updated. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sienna worked in HR at TechFlow Solutions, the biggest startup in our little corner of Maine. She spent her days preaching about workplace boundaries and professional conduct. Yet here she was, conducting our divorce via BCC. My phone buzzed. Text from my neighbor, Mrs. O'Leary. Saw a moving truck at your place yesterday. Everything okay? Yesterday. So Sienna had been planning this while I was in Portland, consulting for a law firm about their ransomware problem. She'd moved out while I was literally helping someone else clean up their mess. I texted back, all good, Mrs. O, just some spring cleaning. Another buzz, this time from my office. Eric, HR needs to speak with you. Something about updating emergency contacts? I smiled. Sienna's privacy was already cracking. In a town like Millbrook, secrets have a half-life of about 6 hours. By lunch, half the town would know we were separated. By dinner, they'd have theories about why. I grabbed my laptop bag and headed for the door. Time to see exactly how private my wife thought she could keep things. The drive to my office gave me time to think. Sienna and I had been drifting for months, hell, probably years. She'd been working late more often, coming home with stories about team-building exercises and leadership retreats. I'd been buried in my own work helping local businesses protect themselves from increasingly sophisticated cyber attacks. But something felt off about the timing. The email, the moving truck while I was away, the lawyer already contacted. This wasn't a spontaneous decision born from marital drift. This was planned, calculated, strategic. Classic Sienna. My office is in a converted Victorian downtown, shared with an accountant, a data therapist, and a guy who sells artisanal cheese online. I climbed the narrow stairs to my second-floor space, passing Mrs. Chen from the cheese business. Eric, heard about you and Sienna. So sorry, dear. 6 hours. I'd overestimated the half-life of secrets in Millbrook. Thanks, Mrs. Chen. These things happen. She patted my arm sympathetically. My Harold always said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Wise words from Harold. Too bad he'd passed away 3 years ago. I unlocked my office and immediately noticed something wrong. My desk drawer, the one where I kept backup drives and sensitive client information, was slightly ajar. I always lock that drawer. Always. I opened it carefully. Everything seemed to be there, but the arrangement was off. Someone had been through my files. My veins went cold. Not because of the violation, though that stung, but because of what it meant. Sienna had a key to my office. I'd given it to her years ago for emergencies. Apparently, she'd decided the end of our marriage qualified. But what had she been looking for? I booted up my computer and ran a quick diagnostic. No foreign devices had been connected recently, no files accessed remotely. Whatever Sienna wanted, she hadn't found it on my work systems. My personal laptop was a different story. I keep it in a locked cabinet, encrypted and password protected. But the cabinet lock had been picked, professionally, by someone who knew what they were doing. The laptop itself was untouched, thanks to the encryption, but the attempt sent a clear message. Sienna wasn't just leaving me. She was preparing for war. I pulled out my phone and called Terry. Terry Macklin and I had been friends since high school, back when he was getting suspended for hacking the school's grading system, and I was the nerd who helped him cover his tracks. Now, he ran his own security consulting firm, specializing in the kind of surveillance that lived in the gray areas of legal. "Eric, heard about you and the missus. Rough break, buddy." 5 hours, I said. "It's been 5 hours since I found out, and you already know." Mrs. O'Leary called my mom. You know how it is. Of course she did. Mrs. O'Leary was like the town's early warning system, except instead of tornadoes, she tracked divorces, affairs, and who was buying too much wine at the grocery store. "Terry, I need a favor. Someone broke into my office last night. Professional job." His tone shifted from sympathetic to business. "What'd they take?" "Nothing. But they tried to access my personal laptop. I think it was Sienna." "Your wife? Eric, that's my soon-to-be ex-wife. And I think she's planning something bigger than just a simple divorce." Silence on the other end. Terry was thinking, which was always dangerous. "You want me to look into it?" "I want you to help me understand what I'm dealing with. Something about this whole thing feels wrong. I'll be there in 20. I hung up and stared at my office. 15 years of marriage, and I was already thinking in terms of allies and enemies. But Sienna had made the rules when she decided to rifle through my files. If she wanted to play games, I'd play. But she'd forgotten something important about her boring, predictable husband. I make my living understanding how systems work, finding their weaknesses, and exploiting them. And marriage, I was beginning to realize, was just another system. Terry arrived with coffee and his laptop bag, looking like he was ready for a stakeout. He's built like a linebacker who discovered craft beer, broad shoulders, soft middle, and the kind of beard that suggested he'd given up on corporate dress codes years ago. "Show me what we're dealing with," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. I walked him through the timeline, the email, the evidence of the break-in, the systematic way Sienna had planned her exit. Terry whistled low. "She's been thinking about this for a while. That's what worries me. This isn't just about ending our marriage. She's gathering intelligence." "On what?" "I don't know yet. But I'm going to find out." Terry opened his laptop and pulled up what looked like a surveillance interface. "I might be able to help with that. Remember that security system you helped me design for the Morrison account?" I nodded. The Morrison account had been a wealthy family worried about corporate espionage. We'd created a comprehensive monitoring system that tracked everything from network access to physical movement around their property. Well, I might have installed a similar system at a few other locations around town, as field tests. "Terry, please tell me I didn't bug your house, if that's what you're worried about. But TechFlow Solutions? They hired me last year to upgrade their security after that ransomware scare. I might still have access to some of their systems." I stared at him. "That's completely illegal. Only if I'm actively monitoring them. But if I happen to notice some unusual activity while performing routine maintenance on systems I'm contractually obligated to monitor, that's the thinnest legal justification I've ever heard." You want to know what your wife is planning, or do you want to play by the rules she's already broken? He had a point. Sienna had started this by breaking into my office. She'd escalated beyond normal divorce proceedings the moment she decided to treat our marriage like a corporate takeover. What kind of unusual activity? Terry's fingers flew over his keyboard. Well, for starters, your wife has been staying late at the office a lot more than her time card shows. Security badges don't lie. He turned the screen toward me. A log of badge swipes showed Sienna entering the TechFlow building at normal hours, but leaving much later than she'd been telling me. Some nights, she'd been there until nearly midnight. Could be legitimate work, I said, though my gut was telling me otherwise. Could be. But look at this. Another screen. This one showing network access logs. Sienna's user account had been accessing files well outside her HR department's normal scope. Financial records, client databases, executive communications. She's been digging through company files for months, Terry said, way beyond what someone in HR would need. Industrial espionage? Or gathering leverage? Look at the timing. He highlighted a pattern in the access logs. Sienna's unusual file access had intensified over the past 6 weeks, right around the time she'd started staying late and acting distant at home. She's been planning this divorce for at least a month and a half, I said. More than that, she's been building a case. Against who? Me? Terry pulled up another screen. Against TechFlow. Look at what she's been copying. The files Sienna had accessed read like a greatest hits of corporate malfeasance. Executive compensation packages that violated SEC guidelines, client contracts with suspicious terms, email chains discussing practices that skirted employment law. She's been building a whistleblower case, I realized, or preparing for a wrongful termination lawsuit. Either way, she's sitting on enough dirt to bury TechFlow's executive team. I leaned back in my chair, processing the implications. Sienna wasn't just leaving me. She was preparing to torch her career and take TechFlow down with her. The question was why. There's more, Terry said. Remember Blake Torrance? I knew the name. Blake was TechFlow's CEO, a venture capital golden boy who'd moved to Maine to build his authentic startup experience away from Silicon Valley. He drove a Tesla, wore expensive jeans to work, and had the kind of confidence that came from never having been told no. What about him? He's been staying late too, same nights as Sienna. The pieces clicked into place with an almost audible snap. The late nights, the distance, the sudden decision to leave me while gathering dirt on her company. Sienna wasn't just planning a divorce. She was planning an exit strategy that would set her up for life. They're having an affair, I said. Looks like it. But here's the interesting part. Blake's married, too. Wife's name is Catherine, old Maine money. Her family owns half the commercial real estate in Portland. So, if this comes out, Blake loses everything, his company, his marriage, his reputation, and Sienna's got enough evidence to make sure it comes out on her terms. I stared at the screens full of evidence, feeling a cold anger settle in my chest. Sienna hadn't just cheated on me. She'd turned our entire marriage into a cover story while she planned her next move. How long do you think this has been going on? Terry scrolled through more logs. Based on the pattern, at least 4 months, maybe longer. 4 months of lies. 4 months of coming home to me while planning her future with someone else. 4 months of treating me like a placeholder while she orchestrated her grand exit. Eric, Terry said quietly, there's something else. He pulled up a different screen, this one showing financial records. Sienna's been moving money. Small amounts, but consistent. She's got an account you probably don't know about. The account showed regular deposits over the past 3 months, all under the reporting threshold that would trigger automatic notifications. Sienna had been skimming from our joint accounts, building her own nest egg while planning to leave me with the bills. How much? About $15,000 so far. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my stomach. $15,000. Our vacation fund, our emergency savings, money we'd put aside for the future, we were apparently never going to have. She's been stealing from me for months, I said. Technically, it's joint property until the divorce is final. But yeah, she's been planning her exit for a long time. I closed my eyes and tried to process everything. The affair, the corporate espionage, the financial manipulation. Sienna had turned our marriage into a strategic operation, with me as the unwitting mark. "What do you want to do?" Terry asked. I opened my eyes and looked at him. Terry had been my friend for 20 years. He'd seen me through college, the early days of my business, my father's passing, and my mother's remarriage. Now, he was asking if I wanted revenge. "I want to understand what I'm dealing with," I said. "And then I want to make sure she doesn't get away with it." Terry smiled, and it wasn't a particularly nice expression. "Now you're talking my language." The next morning brought another email from Sienna, this one with an attorney's letterhead. The message was brief and corporate. I had 30 days to respond to divorce proceedings, and any attempt to harass or intimidate Mrs. Harlan would result in a restraining order. I forwarded it to my own lawyer, Jim Morrison, whose family Terry had helped with their security system. Jim was old-school Maine, the kind of attorney who still wore suspenders and kept a bottle of bourbon in his desk drawer for special occasions. "Eric," Jim said when I called, "this is pretty aggressive for a no-fault divorce. Usually people try mediation first." "She's not interested in mediation. She wants me out of the way as quickly as possible." "Any idea why?" I thought about what Terry and I had discovered. She's got other priorities right now. "Well, the good news is she can't just kick you out of your own house. The bad news is this is going to get expensive." After hanging up with Jim, I drove to my office and found Terry already there, surrounded by printouts and laptop screens like a conspiracy theorist's dream board. "I've been busy," he said without looking up. "Want to see what your wife's been up to?" He'd spent the night digging deeper into TechFlow's systems, mapping out the full scope of Sienna's activities. The picture that emerged was both impressive and terrifying. "She's not just having an affair," Terry said. "She's running a long-term operation." The evidence was laid out like a military campaign. Sienna had been systematically documenting TechFlow's legal violations while building a personal relationship with Blake. She'd copied financial records, saved incriminating emails, and even recorded conversations using her company-issued phone. "She's got enough evidence to destroy the company," I said. "Or to blackmail Blake into leaving his wife. Look at this." Terry showed me a series of text messages between Sienna and Blake, recovered from TechFlow's backup servers. The early messages were professional, but they quickly evolved into something more personal. Blake: "The board meeting went well. Dinner to celebrate?" Sienna: "Wouldn't that be inappropriate? I'm in HR, remember?" Blake: "Since when do you care about appropriate?" The messages grew increasingly personal, and eventually became explicit. But what really caught my attention was the subtext. Sienna was constantly steering the conversation toward Blake's marriage, his finances, his weaknesses. "She's been playing him from the beginning," I realized. "Gets better. Look at the timeline." Terry had cross-referenced the messages with Sienna's behavior at home. The first flirtatious text had been sent the same night she'd told me she was working late on employee handbook revisions. The first explicit message coincided with a weekend she'd spent at a professional development conference in Boston. "Every lie she told you corresponds to a step forward in her relationship with Blake, Terry said. This wasn't a spontaneous affair. It was a calculated seduction. I studied the evidence, feeling my anger crystallize into something colder and more focused. Sienna had been living a double life for months, treating our marriage like a convenient cover story while she pursued her real target. What's her endgame? Near as I can tell, she wants Blake to leave his wife and marry her, but she's also building an insurance policy in case he doesn't. Terry pulled up another screen showing financial projections. If she goes public with what she knows about TechFlow, she could probably negotiate a whistleblower settlement worth millions. Even if the SEC doesn't pay out, Blake would probably pay her to keep quiet. So either way, she wins. Either way, she's set for life. Blake leaves his wife, she gets the rich husband. Blake doesn't leave his wife. She gets the hush, money. I sat back in my chair, admiring the ruthless elegance of Sienna's plan despite myself. She'd identified what she wanted, developed multiple strategies to get it, and executed them with military precision. There was just one problem with her plan. She'd underestimated me. Terry, I need you to do something for me. Name it. I need to know everything about Blake Torrance. His finances, his marriage, his business relationships, everything. That's going to take some time. We've got time. Sienna thinks she's dealing with the same boring, predictable husband she's been lying to for months. She has no idea what I'm capable of when I'm motivated. Terry grinned. This is going to be fun. While Terry worked his magic on Blake's background, I decided to do some field research of my own. Millbrook might be small, but it had a surprisingly active social scene centered around a few key locations. The Coffee Bean was where the professional crowd gathered for morning gossip. The Rusty Anchor was where the blue-collar folks went to complain about the professional crowd. And Stella's Wine Bar was where both groups went to pretend they were sophisticated. I started at the Coffee Bean, arriving during the morning rush when TechFlow employees would be grabbing their caffeine fixes before work. I didn't have to wait long. Eric? Oh my God, I heard about you and Sienna. I'm so sorry. Lila Chen, no relation to the cheese lady, was Sienna's closest friend at TechFlow. She was also the office gossip, which made her both a valuable source of information and a dangerous enemy. Thanks, Lila. It's been a rough few days. I just can't believe she didn't tell me what was going on. We talk about everything. Interesting. Either Sienna had kept her affair secret from her best friend, or Lila was fishing for information. You know how Sienna is about privacy, I said. She likes to keep things compartmentalized. Lila nodded sympathetically, but I caught something in her expression, a flicker of knowledge she was trying to hide. Well, if you need anything, let me know. I know this must be hard. Actually, there is something. Sienna left so quickly she forgot to give me the password for our streaming accounts. You don't happen to know if she's been staying somewhere with good Wi-Fi? It was a fishing expedition, but Lila took the bait. Oh, she's been staying at the Millbrook Inn downtown. At least, that's what she told HR when she updated her address. The Millbrook Inn was expensive. Too expensive for someone living on an HR salary, but it would be perfect for someone having an affair with her boss. Thanks, Lila. I'll try to reach her there. I left the Coffee Bean with my first piece of actionable intelligence. Sienna was staying at the inn, probably in a room paid for by Blake. It was a small detail, but it confirmed that their affair had moved beyond stolen moments in the office. My next stop was the Rusty Anchor, where I knew I'd find Danny Morrison, Jim the lawyer's nephew, who worked maintenance at the Millbrook Inn. Danny was the kind of guy who noticed everything and remembered most of it, especially when it involved people acting suspicious. Eric, heard about your troubles. Rough break, buddy. Thanks, Danny. Buy you a beer? It's 11 in the morning. So? Danny laughed and accepted the beer. What's on your mind? My wife's been staying at your hotel. I'm trying to figure out if I should contest the divorce or just let it go. The redhead in 412? Yeah, she's been there about a week. Nice enough, tips well. She been alone? Danny gave me a look that suggested he knew exactly what I was asking. Officially? Yeah, she's alone. Unofficially? She's had a visitor most nights. Guy drives a white Tesla, always parks in the back lot. Blake. I'd expected as much, but confirmation still felt like a punch to the gut. Regular visitor? Like clockwork. Shows up around 8, leaves before midnight. Real careful about not being seen from the street. I bought Danny another beer and left with the confirmation I'd needed. Sienna and Blake were actively continuing their affair while she was supposedly separated from me for emotional reasons. It was exactly the kind of detail that would matter in divorce proceedings. My phone buzzed with a text from Terry. Found something interesting about Blake. Meet me at the office. I didn't hesitate. I hopped into my car and drove downtown, the familiar roads passing by in a blur as my mind raced. On the way, I passed the Millbrook Inn, a grand, restored Victorian mansion that had been converted into a high-end hotel catering to wealthy tourists and business travelers. It was the kind of place where one night's stay cost more than most people in Millbrook made in an entire week. It always struck me as a bit out of place in our small town. Luxury, surrounded by modest homes and a quieter, simpler way of life. But I suppose even in a town like ours, there's a market for those who crave opulence. When I arrived at the office, Terry was practically vibrating with excitement. His usually laid-back demeanor was gone, replaced by a manic energy I hadn't seen before. He didn't even wait for me to say anything. He just blurted it out. Blake Torrance is not as clean as he pretends to be. I raised an eyebrow. What did you find? Terry, grinning like a kid who'd just discovered something huge, replied, His company's in trouble. Big trouble. I followed him into the back office where he'd been working for hours. Terry had spent the morning combing through TechFlow's financial records, using his legitimate access to their internal systems as a cover. He'd been digging deep, knowing that TechFlow's corporate structure was more complicated than most, and that the higher the stakes, the more buried the secrets would be. What he uncovered, however, was more than just a few suspicious transactions. They're burning through cash faster than they're bringing it in, he said, his voice steady but tinged with disbelief. Blake's been using some seriously creative accounting to hide it from the board and investors, but the numbers don't lie. His company is teetering on the edge of collapse. How creative? I asked, already dreading the answer. Terry leaned over the desk, showing me his laptop screen, which was filled with spreadsheet after spreadsheet of data. The kind of creative that could land him in federal prison if the SEC gets involved. We're talking about falsifying revenue, hiding expenses, and moving money between accounts to make the books look like they're in the black when they're not. It's textbook financial fraud. I sat back in my chair, processing what Terry had said. This was bad, really bad. So, he's trying to cover it all up. But why the affair with Sienna? Doesn't that just add to the mess? Gets worse, Terry said, not even flinching at the mention of Sienna. Blake's wife, Catherine, isn't just some rich socialite. She's his primary investor. If she divorces him, she can pull her funding and shut down TechFlow overnight. I felt the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fit together, each part slotting into place with an almost painful precision. So Blake's stuck. He's caught between a failing business and a wife who holds the power to destroy him financially. And that's where Sienna comes in. She knows all about the company's dirty little secrets. She could ruin him, but she's also offering him a way out. He's not just having an affair with her, he's hoping she'll help him get out of this mess without losing everything. Terry nodded, his expression grim. Exactly. Blake's using Sienna as leverage. If he can keep her quiet, maybe he can salvage his business, or at least his freedom. But here's the thing. If Sienna goes public with what she knows, Blake loses everything either way. I finished for him, the realization hitting me like a cold wave. His company, his marriage, his reputation, everything. He's boxed in. That's right, Terry said, tapping his fingers on the desk. The only way Blake can avoid complete ruin is if he can convince Sienna to stay quiet. He needs to make her believe it's in her best interest to keep all that dirty laundry locked up. I leaned back, my mind racing as I tried to piece together Blake's next move. How the hell is he going to do that? Sienna knows too much. She's not someone you can just threaten into silence. And if she goes public, it's not just about his business. She could destroy his entire life. Terry's eyes narrowed. That's the million-dollar question. And that's what makes this whole thing so dangerous. Blake isn't just trying to protect his company. He's trying to salvage everything that's left of his life. His marriage, his money, his freedom. Sienna could ruin all of it. And he knows it. The question is whether he's willing to go to any lengths to stop her from exposing him. Yeah, but what lengths are we talking about? I muttered, rubbing my temples. Blake's already playing with fire. How much further can he go before he burns everything down? Terry didn't answer right away. Instead, he clicked through a few more documents on his laptop, his face darkening with each one. I don't know, but whatever it takes, he'll do it. Whether it's manipulation, coercion, or something even darker, Blake will do whatever he has to in order to keep his secrets buried. Terry smiled grimly. By giving her what she wants. A new life, a new identity, and enough money to disappear. I stared at the financial records, understanding finally dawning. This wasn't just about an affair or even a divorce. Sienna and Blake were planning to run away together, using TechFlow's remaining assets and whatever they could extract from their respective spouses. They're going to liquidate everything and disappear, I said. That's my guess. Blake's been moving money to offshore accounts for the past month. Small amounts, but consistent. While Sienna's been skimming from our joint accounts, they're both building escape funds. The question is when they plan to use them. I thought about the timeline of the divorce proceedings. 30 days to respond, which meant 30 days for Sienna to finalize whatever she was planning. Soon, I said. They can't maintain this charade much longer. So what do? I looked at Terry, my oldest friend, who'd spent the last 2 days helping me uncover my wife's betrayal. He was asking if I wanted to stop them or expose them or call the authorities. But I was thinking about something else entirely. We're going to beat them at their own game, I said. How? By giving them exactly what they want and making sure they regret it. Terry raised an eyebrow. That sounds ominous. Sienna thinks she's the only one who knows how to play the long game. She thinks I'm just a boring tech consultant who'll roll over and accept whatever she decides to do. You're not? I smiled, and it felt cold on my face. Terry, I've spent 15 years learning every detail of my wife's life. I know her passwords, her habits, her fears, her weaknesses. I know how she thinks and how she reacts under pressure. And she knows almost nothing about me. She sees what I let her see, the predictable husband, the reliable provider, the man who never rocks the boat. Terry was grinning now. But that's not who you really are. I'm the guy who helped you hack the school's grading system. I'm the guy who spent 20 years learning how to find weaknesses in systems and exploit them. I'm the guy who knows that the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting even. What did you have in mind? I turned to look out the window toward the Millbrook Inn, where my wife was probably planning her next move. Sienna wants to destroy my life and disappear with her lover? Fine. But she's forgotten something important. What's that? I know all her secrets, but she doesn't know any of mine. The beauty of Sienna's plan was its complexity. She'd built multiple layers of deception, each one designed to protect her from discovery while advancing her goals. The weakness of her plan was the same thing. It was so complex that disrupting any single element would cause the whole thing to collapse. I decided to start with the foundation, her relationship with Blake. I need you to do something that might be slightly illegal, I told Terry the next morning. My favorite kind of request. What do you need? I need to get into Blake's Tesla. Terry raised an eyebrow. Why? Because I want to plant something that will make Sienna question whether she can trust him. What kind of something? I pulled out a small device that looked like a USB drive. GPS tracker with audio recording capability. If I can get it installed in his car, I'll be able to monitor his movements and conversations. Eric, that's definitely illegal. So is embezzling company funds and planning to flee the country. I'm just leveling the playing field. Terry considered this. How do you plan to get access to his car? Blake has a routine. Every Tuesday, he goes to the gym at the Millbrook Athletic Club. He parks in the same spot, works out for exactly 90 minutes, then goes to lunch at Stella's wine bar. You've been watching him. I've been learning his patterns. Today's Tuesday. Terry shook his head, but he was smiling. This is insane. This is justice. We drove to the athletic club in Terry's van, which was equipped with enough surveillance equipment to make the FBI jealous. Blake's white Tesla was parked exactly where I'd expected, in a spot that gave him easy access to the building, but was shielded from most of the parking lot cameras. You sure about this? Terry asked as he handed me a set of lockpicks. Blake's been sleeping with my wife for months, I'm sure. The Tesla's security system was more sophisticated than most cars, but it wasn't designed to stop someone with my background. I had the door open in under 2 minutes, and the tracking device installed in under 5. Done, I said, sliding back into Terry's van. Now we wait. We didn't have to wait long. The device started transmitting immediately, giving us Blake's exact location and access to his car's audio system. Within an hour, we had our first useful intelligence. Blake made a phone call from his car after leaving the gym. Catherine, it's me. No, I can't make dinner tonight. Another board meeting. Yes, I know we haven't spent much time together lately. I'll make it up to you this weekend, I promise. Terry and I exchanged glances. Blake was lying to his wife about working late. The same lie Sienna had been telling me for months. The next call was more interesting. Sienna, it's me. Can you talk? Good. I've been thinking about what we discussed. The timeline might need to move up. No, nothing's wrong, but Catherine's been asking questions. Yes, I'm sure. Tomorrow night. We'll finalize everything then. Tomorrow night, Terry said. They're planning something. Time to accelerate our own timeline. I spent the rest of the day preparing for phase 2 of my plan. If Sienna and Blake were moving up their schedule, I needed to be ready with a response that would throw them completely off balance. That evening, I drove to the Millbrook Inn and parked across the street. At exactly 8:15 p.m., Blake's Tesla pulled into the back lot. He was nothing if not predictable. I waited 30 minutes, then walked into the hotel lobby like I belonged there. The desk clerk was a young woman I didn't recognize, probably a college student working part-time. Excuse me, I said, putting on my most concerned expression. I'm supposed to meet my wife here, but I can't remember her room number. Sienna Harlan? The clerk checked her computer. Room 412. Should I call up and let her know you're here? No, thanks. I want to surprise her. I took the elevator to the 4th floor and walked quietly down the hall to room 412. The door was slightly ajar. Blake and Sienna were being careless, probably because they thought they were safe. I could hear voices inside, and I recognized both of them. Move the money tomorrow, Blake was saying. Once it's in the Cayman account, we'll be untouchable. What about the SEC investigation? Sienna's voice. If they freeze the company assets, they won't. I've got enough legitimate transactions mixed in to confuse any audit. By the time they have what's missing will be long gone. And your wife? Catherine won't be a problem. She'll be too busy trying to salvage her investment to worry about where I went. What about Eric? A pause. Then Blake's voice, dismissive. What about him? He's a nobody. Small-town tech support guy with no connections and no resources. By the time he figures out what happened, we'll be sipping drinks on a beach somewhere. I felt my jaw clench. A nobody. Small-town tech support with no resources. He's smarter than you think, Sienna said, and for a moment I felt a flicker of something. Not affection, but maybe respect for the man she'd been married to for 15 years. Smart enough to stop us? Blake's voice was amused. I doubt it. That flicker of whatever I'd felt for Sienna vanished instantly. I pulled out my phone and started recording. For the next 20 minutes, I documented Blake and Sienna's plan in their own words. They were planning to liquidate TechFlow's remaining assets, transfer the money to offshore accounts, and disappear within the week. Blake would fake a family emergency that required him to travel abroad. Sienna would claim her divorce proceedings required her to relocate for her safety. By the time they finished talking, I had enough evidence to send them both to federal prison. But prison was too easy. I wanted them to suffer the way they'd made me suffer, through betrayal, humiliation, and the slow realization that everything they'd worked for was crumbling around them. I wanted them to know what it felt like to be nobody. The next morning, I started making phone calls. The first call was to Catherine Torrance. Blake's wife was listed in the phone book. Old Maine families always were, and she answered on the second ring. Mrs. Torrance? This is Eric Harlan. I think we need to talk. I'm sorry, do I know you? Your husband is having an affair with my wife. I think we have some mutual interests. Silence on the other end. Then, where would you like to meet? Catherine Torrance was everything Sienna wasn't. Old money, elegant, quietly confident, and absolutely ruthless when crossed. We met at a small cafe outside of town, away from Millbrook's gossip network. How long have you known? She asked without preamble. About a week. How long have you suspected? Months. Blake's been acting strange, working late, taking mysterious phone calls. I hired a private investigator, but he hasn't found anything concrete yet. I can give you concrete. I showed her the photos Terry had taken, the financial records we'd uncovered, and played selected portions of the audio recording from the hotel room. Catherine listened without emotion, but I could see the anger building behind her eyes. They're planning to steal from TechFlow and disappear, she said when I finished. With your money. With my family's money. Her voice was ice cold. My grandfather started the investment firm that funded Blake's company. That money represents 4 generations of my family's work. What do you want to do about it? Catherine smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression I'd ever seen on another human being. I want to destroy them both, completely and permanently. I was hoping you'd say that. We spent the next hour planning Blake and Sienna's downfall. Catherine had resources I couldn't have imagined. Connections in banking, law enforcement, and media that could make their lives a living hell. I had technical skills and intimate knowledge of their plans. Together, we were going to give them exactly what they deserved. "There's one thing I want to make clear," Catherine said as we prepared to leave. "When this is over, your wife and my husband will have nothing. No money, no reputation, no future. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the recording I'd made the night before. Blake calling me a nobody. Sienna agreeing that I was too stupid to stop them. "I'm prepared," I said. Catherine nodded. "Then let's begin." The Millbrook Fall Festival was the kind of small-town event that brought everyone together. Families with children, elderly couples, teenagers looking for somewhere to hang out, and business owners trying to network, while pretending to have fun. It was also the perfect place to destroy someone's reputation in front of the entire town. I'd spent 3 days preparing for this moment, working with Terry and Catherine to orchestrate what we were calling the revelation. Blake and Sienna had no idea what was coming. "You sure about this?" Terry asked as we set up our equipment in the festival's tech booth. As the town's unofficial IT support, I'd volunteered to help with the sound system and digital displays. Nobody questioned my access to the main projection system. "They called me a nobody," I said, connecting my laptop to the festival's Wi-Fi network. Time to show them what a nobody can do. Catherine was positioned across the festival grounds, near the food trucks where Blake and Sienna were supposed to meet for lunch. She'd been tracking Blake's movements through his credit card transactions and knew exactly where he'd be. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "They're here. Blake just bought 2 lobster rolls. Sienna's with him." I looked out at the crowd gathered in front of the main stage, where the mayor was preparing to give his annual State of Millbrook address. At least 300 people were there, including most of TechFlow's employees, Blake's business associates, and half the town's gossip network. Perfect. "Terry, you ready?" "Born ready. You want to do the honors?" I opened the file I'd prepared, a multimedia presentation that told the story of Blake and Sienna's affair using their own text messages, financial records, and audio recordings. I'd edited it like a documentary, complete with timestamps and explanatory text. "Ladies and gentlemen," the mayor was saying, "before we begin today's festivities, I'd like to recognize some of our local business leaders who make Millbrook such a wonderful place to live." I clicked upload and watched as my presentation replaced the mayor's slideshow on the main screen. The first image was a text message from Blake to Sienna. "Can't wait to get you alone tonight. Wear that red dress I bought you." A murmur went through the crowd as people realized what they were seeing. The second image was Sienna's response. "Only if you promise to leave your wife like you said you would." The murmur became a buzz of excited conversation. The third image was a bank statement showing Blake transferring TechFlow funds to a personal account. The buzz became a roar. I watched from the tech booth as the crowd's attention shifted from the stage to the screens, then to Blake and Sienna themselves. Someone in the crowd pointed, and suddenly, everyone was looking at them. Blake's face had gone completely white. Sienna looked like she was about to be sick. The presentation continued, methodically documenting their affair, their embezzlement scheme, and their plans to flee the country. Each new revelation drew gasps and shouts from the crowd. "Turn it off!" Blake was all, shouting, pushing through the crowd toward the tech booth. "Turn it off right now." But it was too late. The damage was done. 300 people had seen the evidence of Blake and Sienna's betrayal, and in a town like Millbrook, that meant everyone would know within hours. Blake reached the tech booth just as the presentation ended. "You son of a bastard!" he snarled, grabbing me by the shirt. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I've told the truth," I said calmly. Something you and my wife seem to have trouble with. I'll sue you for everything you have. Invasion of privacy, defamation, corporate espionage. With what money? Catherine's voice cut through Blake's threats like a knife. She'd appeared behind him, flanked by two men in expensive suits. I froze all of TechFlow's accounts an hour ago. As the primary investor, I have that right when I suspect financial irregularities. Blake spun around to face his wife. Catherine, I can explain. No need. I heard the explanation on the recording Eric played for me yesterday. The one where you called me a boring old money bastard who was too stupid to notice you stealing from me. I hadn't included that particular clip in the public presentation, but Catherine had heard it during our private meeting. Blake's face went from white to gray. The FBI will be here shortly, one of Catherine's companions said. He had the look of a federal agent, bland suit, serious expression, the kind of quiet authority that came from carrying a badge. Mr. Torrance, you're going to want to speak with an attorney. Blake looked around desperately, but there was nowhere to run. The crowd had formed a loose circle around us, and their expressions ranged from shocked to angry to gleeful. In a small town, watching the mighty fall was better entertainment than cable TV. This is all his fault, Blake said, pointing at me. He's been stalking us, hacking our computers, violating our privacy. Actually, Terry said, stepping forward with his laptop, everything we used was obtained legally. Security footage from public spaces, financial records from systems I'm contractually authorized to monitor, and audio recordings made in public places where there's no expectation of privacy. The hotel room wasn't public. The hotel room door was open, I said. Anyone walking down the hall could have heard your conversation. That makes it legally admissible. Blake's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He'd been outmaneuvered and he knew it. Where's Sienna? Catherine asked. I looked around the crowd. In all the commotion, my wife had disappeared. She's probably running, I said. It's what she does when things get difficult. But Sienna wasn't running. She was planning a counterattack. I found out how desperate she'd become when I got home that evening. My house had been ransacked, drawers pulled out, papers scattered, furniture overturned. Someone had been looking for something specific. My phone rang as I stood in the wreckage of my living room. Eric, it's Sienna. Where are you? Somewhere safe. We need to talk. I think we're past talking. I don't think you understand what you've done. Blake wasn't the only one with secrets. What's that supposed to mean? It means I know about your little side business, the one you've been running out of your home office. I felt a chill run down my spine. I don't know what you're talking about. The gray hat consulting, Eric. The jobs you take that aren't quite legal but aren't quite illegal either. The corporate espionage, the competitive intelligence gathering, the data recovery services for people who can't go to the police. She was talking about the part of my business I kept carefully separated from my legitimate consulting work. The clients who paid cash, who needed problems solved quietly, who couldn't afford to have their activities scrutinized too closely. You don't have any proof of that, don't I? I've been in your office, Eric. I've seen your files. I know about the Martinelli job, the Henderson divorce case, the industrial espionage work you did for that pharmaceutical company. The Martinelli job had involved recovering stolen trade secrets from a competitor. The Henderson case had required me to dig up evidence of hidden assets during a messy divorce. The pharmaceutical work had involved activities that existed in a legal gray area. What do you want, Sienna? I want you to back off. Call off your FBI friends, stop cooperating with Catherine, and let Blake and me disappear quietly. And if I don't, Then I go to the authorities with evidence that you've been running a criminal enterprise for years. How do you think that will play with your legitimate clients? How do you think it will look to the FBI agents who are currently treating you as a helpful witness? I sank into my overturned chair, processing the implications. Sienna was right. If my gray market activities became public, they would destroy my reputation and probably land me in federal prison. The line between competitive intelligence and corporate espionage was thinner than most people realized. "You've been planning this for a while," I said. "I've been planning for every contingency. Did you really think I'd build an exit strategy without considering what you might do to stop me? So what now? Now you choose. Your reputation and freedom or your revenge." I closed my eyes and thought about everything that had led to this moment. Sienna's betrayal, Blake's arrogance, the months of lies and manipulation. They'd played me perfectly, and even now, with their plans in ruins, Sienna was still one step ahead. "I need time to think," I said. "You have until tomorrow morning. After that, I start making phone calls." She hung up, leaving me alone in my destroyed house with an impossible choice. But as I sat there in the wreckage, I realized something important. Sienna had made a crucial mistake. She'd assumed I cared more about my reputation than I did about justice. She was wrong. I called Catherine at 6 a.m. "She's trying to blackmail me," I said without preamble. "With what?" I told her about Sienna's threat, about the gray market work I'd been doing, about the choice I was supposed to make between my freedom and my revenge. Catherine listened without comment, then said, "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to call her bluff. Even if it means going to prison? Even if it means going to prison." Catherine was quiet for a moment. Then, "You might not have to make that choice." "What do you mean?" "Meet me at my attorney's office in an hour. Bring everything you have on Sienna's blackmail attempt." Catherine's attorney was the kind of lawyer who charged more per hour than most people made in a month. His office was in Portland, in a building that screamed old money and quiet power. "Mr. Harlan," the attorney said after reviewing my files, "you're in a difficult position, but not an impossible one." "How so?" "Your wife's evidence was obtained through illegal means. She broke into your office, stole confidential client information, and is now attempting to use it for extortion. That makes her evidence inadmissible and her actions criminal. But the underlying activities may or may not be illegal, depending on how they're interpreted. But that's a question for another day. Right now, we focus on the fact that your wife is committing multiple felonies in an attempt to avoid prosecution for her own crimes." Catherine leaned forward. "What do you recommend?" "We go on the offensive. Immediately." Within 2 hours, we had a plan. Catherine's connections in law enforcement would ensure that Sienna's blackmail attempt was treated as a serious crime. My technical expertise would help document her illegal activities, and Catherine's resources would make sure the whole thing played out in the most public, humiliating way possible. "She wants to threaten you?" Catherine said as we left the attorney's office. "Let's show her what real threats look like." The confrontation came sooner than expected. Sienna had been staying at a motel outside of town, probably trying to stay off Blake's trail while she figured out her next move. But Terry's surveillance network was more comprehensive than she'd realized. "Found her," Terry said, calling me at noon. "Millbrook Motor Lodge, room 23. She's been there since yesterday." "Is she alone?" "Far as I can tell. Blake's in federal custody, so unless she's got another boyfriend we don't know about." I drove to the motel with Catherine and Terry, along with 2 FBI agents who'd been investigating TechFlow's financial irregularities. We were going to end this once and for all. Sienna opened the door on the second knock, and the look on her face when she saw our little group was almost worth everything I'd been through. Hello, Sienna, I said. We need to talk. She tried to close the door, but one of the FBI agents put his foot in the way. Mrs. Harlan, I'm Special Agent Morrison. We have some questions about your activities over the past several months. I want a lawyer. That's your right. But first, we'd like to discuss your attempt to extort your husband using illegally obtained evidence. Sienna's face went white. She looked at me with something that might have been respect, or might have been hatred. You recorded our phone call. I documented your blackmail attempt, yes, just like you documented my private business activities. The difference is, what I did was legal. Agent Morrison stepped forward. Mrs. Harlan, you're under arrest for extortion, breaking and entering, theft of confidential information, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. As they read Sienna her rights, she looked at me one last time. You think you've won, she said. But this isn't over. Yes, it is, I replied. You just don't know it yet. The final act played out over the next several weeks, as Blake and Sienna's crimes became front-page news in the local papers and the subject of endless speculation on social media. TechFlow collapsed, taking Blake's reputation and Catherine's investment with it. But Catherine had insurance, and she had lawyers, and she had the kind of connections that ensured Blake would spend the next decade in federal prison. Sienna tried to make a deal, offering to testify against Blake in exchange for a reduced sentence. But the evidence was so overwhelming that prosecutors didn't need her cooperation. She ended up with 5 years for her role in the embezzlement scheme, plus additional time for the extortion attempt. The gray market activities she'd threatened to expose were investigated, but Catherine's attorney had been right. Without Sienna's illegally obtained evidence, there wasn't enough for prosecutors to build a case. I had to shut down that part of my business, but I kept my freedom and my reputation. More importantly, I kept my self-respect. The divorce was finalized while Sienna was in federal custody, awaiting trial. She got nothing. No alimony, no property settlement, no share of our assets. Her attorney argued that she was entitled to half of everything we'd built together, but it's hard to make that case when your client is in prison for stealing from her husband. I kept the house, the business, and the satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served. 6 months after Sienna's sentencing, I was having a beer at the Rusty Anchor when Blake walked in. He looked terrible, thin, pale, wearing clothes that had seen better days. Federal prison had not been kind to him. "Eric," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Mind if I join you?" Free country. Or at least it is for those of us who aren't on parole. Blake winced. I deserved that. You deserved a lot more than that. He ordered a beer and sat in silence for a few minutes, apparently gathering his courage. I wanted to apologize, he finally said. For what? Sleeping with my wife? Stealing from your company? Calling me a nobody? You'll have to be more specific. For all of it, I was in a bad place, and I made terrible decisions. You were in a bad place because you made terrible decisions. Don't confuse cause and effect. Blake nodded miserably. You're right. I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or deception, but all I saw was a broken man who'd lost everything and was trying to figure out how to live with the consequences. Apology noted, I said. Anything else? How did you do it? Do what? Destroy us so completely. Sienna and I, we thought we had everything figured out. We had plans, backup plans, contingencies. But you anticipated everything. I took a long drink of my beer, considering how to answer. You made one fundamental mistake, I said finally. What's that? You underestimated me. You saw what you wanted to see. a boring, predictable husband who would roll over and accept whatever you decided to do to him. But that's not who you are. No, it's not. I'm someone who spent 15 years learning every detail of my wife's life, every weakness in her character, every vulnerability in her plans. I'm someone who makes his living finding flaws in systems and exploiting them. And our affair was just another system to you? Your affair was a system built on lies, greed, and arrogance. It was always going to collapse, eventually. I just helped it along. Blake finished his beer and stood to leave. For what it's worth, Sienna really did love you. At least in the beginning. If she loved me, she wouldn't have betrayed me. People are complicated, Eric. Love and betrayal aren't mutually exclusive. Maybe not, but actions have consequences, and those consequences don't care about your feelings. Blake nodded and walked toward the door. Then he stopped and turned back. What are you going to do now? Now? Now, I'm going to finish my beer, go home to my house, and get on with my life. The life I built, that I earned, that nobody can take away from me. And Sienna? Sienna made her choices. Now she gets to live with them. Blake left, and I sat alone in the bar, thinking about the past year and everything that had happened. Sienna's betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but in the end, it had made me stronger. I'd learned things about myself I'd never known, that I was capable of patience, of planning, of ruthless calculation when pushed far enough. I'd also learned that revenge, properly executed, wasn't about anger or hatred. It was about justice. It was about making sure that actions had appropriate consequences. Sienna had wanted to destroy my life and disappear with her lover, using my trust and naivety as weapons against me. Instead, she'd discovered that her boring, predictable husband was neither boring nor predictable when properly motivated. She'd wanted privacy? She got it. The privacy of a federal prison cell, where she could contemplate her choices without distraction. She'd wanted freedom? She got that too. Freedom from the responsibilities of marriage, property ownership, and financial security. She'd wanted a new life? Well, she certainly got that. My phone buzzed with a text from Terry. "Drink tonight? I've got news about a new client." I smiled and finished my beer. Terry's new clients were always interesting. People with problems that required creative solutions. Situations that existed in the gray areas between legal and illegal. I'd sworn off that kind of work after Sienna's blackmail attempt. But maybe it was time to reconsider. After all, I'd learned a lot about myself over the past year. I'd discovered that I had a talent for seeing through deceptions, for planning complex operations, for staying calm under pressure. Those were valuable skills in the right circumstances. I texted Terry back. Sure, but this time we do everything completely above board. Where's the fun in that? The fun is in not going to federal prison. Fair point. See you at 8. I left the Rusty Anchor and drove home through the streets of Millbrook, past the Coffee Bean where Lila Chen still gossiped about other people's lives, past the Millbrook Inn where Sienna and Blake had planned their doomed escape, past TechFlow's empty office building with its for lease signs in the windows. My house looked exactly the same as it had a year ago, but everything was different now. The mortgage was in my name only. The utilities, the insurance, the property taxes, all my responsibility, all under my control. It was exactly what I'd wanted. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, thinking about Sienna. She'd be getting out of prison in 4 years, assuming good behavior. She'd be in her late 30s, with a criminal record, no money, no job prospects, and no friends who'd stood by her through the scandal. She'd probably try to contact me, to apologize or ask for help or attempt some kind of reconciliation. It was what people did when they'd lost everything, and had nowhere else to turn. When that day came, I'd be ready with an answer. But for now, I had other things to think about. Terry's new client, whatever legitimate challenges they might present. The expansion of my security consulting business, which had grown significantly thanks to the publicity from the TechFlow case. The possibility of finding someone new, someone who understood the difference between love and betrayal. I got out of the car and walked to my front door, fishing for my keys. The porch light was on, just as I'd left. The house was quiet, secure, mine. As I opened the door, I thought about Blake's question. What are you going to do now? The answer was simple. I was going to live well. I was going to build on what I'd learned, to use my skills and experience to help people solve their problems and protect what mattered to them. And if someone tried to betray me again, to use my trust as a weapon against me? Well, they'd discover what Sienna and Blake had learned the hard way, that underestimating Eric Harlan was a mistake you only made once. I stepped inside my house and closed the door behind me, leaving the past where it belonged and looking forward to whatever came next. After all, I'd already proven that I was nobody to mess with.